Well, good day, everybody, and welcome once again to a roundtable discussion. This time we are going to be talking about prescription medications. It's becoming a real problem nationwide and even here in our community in Cottonwood, the Verde Valley, and around Yavapai County. We put together a very good panel today. We want to thank a number of our sponsors who have put this program together, and I want to lead off with MatForce itself. Members of our panel today are members of MatForce and Marilee Fowler, the executive director, done a terrific job with that organization and with today's program. It wouldn't be happening without the sponsorship of MatForce, also the Verde Santa Fe Golf Club, Rice Accounting, Jackson Hewitt, and Yavapai College. We'll chat a bit more about each of them later. We thank them so much for providing the time to bring this panel to you today, talking about prescription medications. One of the things one of our panelists that I'll introduce in a moment just brought in this morning, and it really tells a strong story about what is happening and kind of sets the tone for our discussion today, if I may. This comes this week, Richard, out of the New York Times, I think you told me.
New York Times.
Okay, Dr. Nora Valco is a neuroscientist in charge of the National Institute on Drug Abuse. The toll from soaring rates of prescription drug abuse, including both psychiatric medications and drugs for pain, has begun to dwarf that of the usual illegal culprits. Hospitalizations related to prescription drugs are up 5-fold in the last decade. Overdose deaths are up 4-fold. More high school seniors report recreational use of tranquilizers or prescription narcotics such as OxyContin and Vicodin than heroin and cocaine combined. That says an awful lot. Our panel today, folks, are members of MatForce and more importantly serve extremely valuable roles in our community. Richard Dehnert is the Community Relations Coordinator with the Verde Valley Guidance Clinic. We say good day to you, sir.
Good morning.
Good to have you here. Ivan Anderson will be familiar, especially with young people, I think, as part of the Speakers Bureau with MatForce, a firefighter and paramedic with the Verde Valley Fire District. And hello to you.
Good morning.
Ivan's been a guest of ours a number of times. Dr. Leon Cattolico, a DO, family physician, a practice for a long time in the Cottonwood Verde Valley, and very passionate about this issue. Doctor, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation.
Our guest today, too, Detective, almost a doctor, Detective Sergeant Todd Moore with the Cottonwood Police Department. Sergeant, thanks for coming, being a part of this. Our panel, as you can tell by some of the titles and the experience, represents kind of a broad spectrum of folks that are fighting this problem, and we want to just kind of get right to it. The opening statement that we got, Doctor, would you agree with that these problems, or this problem, prescription medication, is really becoming nothing less than a scourge?
Yes, I certainly would agree with that. Some of the research that I did showed a survey that was effective 2007, some statistics that showed that there were 27,500 people who died from an unintentional drug overdose in that year, and that, as you stated, the deaths from overdose of prescription painkillers are increased to the point where more people die from that than from heroin and cocaine combined, as far as overdosage.
We think of, you hear heroin, cocaine, you think drugs and street and addicts and nasty, and too many, if I'm right, and what I understand from coming to MatForce and just trying to read up on these things, so many times it's because these prescription drugs that are given, perhaps in good faith, perhaps not, end up in the wrong hands. Is that what happens?
Well, that's exactly correct, and they end up in the wrong hands, and they're abused from the standpoint of not being used for the purpose in which they were intended.
Right.
They are very good drugs for the relief of pain, acute pain and chronic pain, and in the intended population they have a very good use. But once they get out of the mainstream and into the hands of people who should not be taking them or are taking them for recreational use, then they become deadly.
Richard, at the Verde Valley Guidance Clinic, you folks do a lot of work with people who have had addiction issues of all kinds, including prescription painkillers largely. Isn't that what these typically are, is painkillers?
Well, unfortunately, a wide range of prescription medications are being abused and misdirected, but opioid painkillers are a big part of the problem. And I visited with Patty May, who is the director or program manager for our Women's World program, our residential treatment program in Cottonwood, specifically for women who have co-occurring serious mental illness and chemical dependency or substance abuse disorders. And Patty says that in the past 3 years, many of these people have come to us addicted to prescription pain medication. As a matter of fact, in many cases, they have had to go through detox just in order to be ready to participate in a woman's world. In fact, Patty said that 50 to 75% of the women admitted to Women's World are addicted to prescription drugs, and usually in addition to alcohol or other drugs.
Yeah.
So it's a multifaceted problem.
Just using that lot as an example, is there a typical case? In other words, were any or many, most, whatever, of those folks prescribed these on the up and up, if you will? Or did they get a hold of them by other means and were using them illegally to begin with?
Part of the problem is that people get started with these medications for legitimate reasons. In some cases, but they find that they need more and more in order to get the results that they're looking for. And in cases where the patient becomes addicted and tolerant and needs more and more of the prescription pain medication that they're using, they sometimes get to that point where where they're abusing it. And in those cases, they'll go to someone like Dr. Cattolico and ask for a refill, and then they'll go down the street to another doctor and ask for a refill. And we find that they end up seeking this drug-seeking behavior gets them actually thrown out of the practice. Frequently, a doctor will say, "I know what you're doing, and I'm not going to help you do this, and I can't help you anymore." And so sometimes I think in that situation, people might become part of the illicit drug market just because they're cut off from the normal channels.
And doctor, is there a way to know if the scenario Richard described, if a patient comes to you, needs to be treated, you help them by prescribing something, they go to another doctor, get another script, go to another pharmacy, and on and on. Is there any way for you to know that?
Yes, there is. In Arizona, there is something called a prescription drug monitoring program, and that's administered by the State Board of Pharmacy. So you can go to their website if you are registered with them as a healthcare provider, physician, nurse, pharmacist, and clinics. They can go to this site, put in the patient's name, date of birth, and you can come up with a report that shows, not exactly to the day, but you can show a report of everything they've had filled for the past year, including, or to include Schedule 2 and Schedule 3 narcotic prescriptions.
Okay.
In Schedule 3, they also include the benzodiazepine medications that are used for anxiety. And they have a tendency to be abused too. So those two classes of drugs will show up on this list. And the list is actually generated at the time a person fills a prescription in a pharmacy. That information goes to the state board so that they can compile this list for you. Now, once you have that, you can see where the patient had their prescription filled, when they had it filled, and who was the prescribing doctor, nurse practitioner, or clinic.
And do doctors use this resource? It's happening, I guess, is what I'm getting at. Still, people are doing that. They're bouncing around. I don't know, detective, is there a word for that kind of, when you get a patient who is trying to play the system and going to different doctors and or pharmacies and or different names and things like that?
Well, we call it shopping.
Yeah, okay.
They're doctor shopping, they're pharmacy shopping. And I know in a lot of the investigations that we've had, they don't just stay here in the Verde Valley and shop their doctors. They'll go to Prescott, they'll go to Flagstaff, they'll go to Phoenix.
They make it hard to be followed.
And they make it hard to be followed, absolutely. They'll get parents who are also addicted to help them and get different prescriptions from different places. So it's a very broad problem that we're dealing with the situation.
It seems like enforcement, it would be extremely difficult for these kinds of things, where they've got one foot in the legitimate world, if you will, going and getting physician, you think about that doctor-client relationship and how to not intrude on that, yet if people are abusing the entire system just to get high or for whatever reasons to sell these drugs, whatever it is, it's got to be very difficult for law enforcement to follow.
Yeah, it is difficult. I mean, if you're legally getting a prescription,
right.
There's no laws
Sure.
broken. If you're shopping and you're still getting that prescription legally, it's an issue, but legally there's not a whole lot we can do. Now we have got several people now that we are working on that has been selling the prescription drugs, and we treat them like anybody that's selling heroin, that's selling meth, that's selling any of the other illegal drugs.
Right.
They're treated the same, they're charged the same, and we try to handle it that way. The other way we try to handle it also is with the DUI. We have more of our officers becoming drug recognition experts, and we're finding these people that are, even when you're on prescription drugs, you're still as dangerous under the influence as you are on alcohol or any illegal drugs. So we try to enforce the laws that way too. But yeah, trying to get a hold on the shopping, as we call it, is
very difficult.
Very difficult.
It certainly sounds like it. Guys, we do have to take up short breaks, so let's go ahead and do that. Again, I want to thank one of our sponsors. We want to thank them all, Verde Santa Fe Golf Club, always involved in programs like this. We thank them. We'll be back with our roundtable discussion right after this.
Now, hear this.
For less than $30, you can play 9 holes of golf and dine at Verde Santa Fe in Cornville.
Enjoy 9 holes of golf with a power cart. Receive a sleeve of 3 balls plus dinner at Verde Santa Fe's Grill.
Choose from salmon, prime rib, chicken teriyaki, or anything you desire from the menu.
Reservations for 9 and Dine are recommended.
The fun begins every Friday afternoon at 3 for the TGIF party at Verde Santa Fe Golf Club in Cornville.
For tee times and dinner reservations, call 634-5454.
Understanding people and numbers. There's a career in that. Dispensing help and medication as a pharmacy technician. Yavapai College has the program. The economy has the jobs. Yavapai College. Life explored. Supporting people, keeping them organized has always been your gift. That's the job of a medical assistant. Yavapai College has the program. The economy has the jobs. Yavapai College. Life explored.
Since 1993, Rice Accounting has been assisting Verde Valley residents with their tax returns. A proud part of the National Jackson Hewitt Tax Service, Rice Accounting can prepare all state and federal returns. They can file electronically or prepare paper returns. They're open year-round to assist you with personal and business taxes, quarterlies, payroll, and account services.
Please come on in to Rice Accounting Jackson Hewitt Tax Service. We're open year-round for all of your taxing needs. Thank you.
Every year, 2 million kids play doctor by taking pills not prescribed to them. Talk to your kids about the dangers of prescription drug abuse. The partnership at drugfree.org.
Sponsored by MatForce, the Yavapai County Substance Abuse Coalition.
And welcome back once again to our program, our roundtable discussion today. Happy you are joining us. A lot of great information here. This program will air a number of times on the resource that you're watching right now. Pass it on to a friend, coworker, son or daughter. It is going to be a problem for a while, but we have a group of folks here and a bigger group supporting them with MatForce especially, fighting against this problem of prescription drugs in our community. I have heard, and I'm not sure if this is true, but I'll throw it out there. We've had 6 deaths in Yavapai County this year due to prescription drugs. Richard, have you heard this? Does that sound accurate to you?
That's what I have heard, and those are the numbers that Marilee Fowler has been given. I think at this point, MatForce is, and particularly the Verde Valley Steering Committee, of which we are all members, at this point, I think MatForce is trying to put together the facts and to find out really with good data what the problem is, and using that as an approach to trying to figure out what to do about it.
One is too many.
One is too many.
But that it continues is what seems to be very, very shocking.
Exactly.
Ivan, I want to ask you, we've had a number of these deaths have involved, and I'm not trying to pick on any element of the society, but a number of these deaths have involved younger people, because when I was 20, I was going to live forever. And I knew it, and I was sure of it, and nothing could stop me. And that is just how it is. It's part of the beauty of being young. Mm-hmm. But when folks, whether they're young or old, mix, especially with alcohol, as so often happens, some of these prescription drugs that the doctors mentioned, what happens? What does the body go through and have to fight?
Well, specifically the narcotics, the side effects of those, it depresses your central nervous system, and so it slows your breathing down. And the more you take, obviously, the slower it gets, and to a point it will actually stop it eventually. Now you mix it with alcohol, which is a depressant also. You're combining the two, and you just double the effects on your body, and if you weren't going to quite become overdosed, now you pretty much guaranteed you are, because you combine the two, and that we've seen, like you said, of these 6 deaths, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Detective, at least 2 of them were alcohol and narcotics combined. So.
Yeah. And many of these, I think, were accidental. I mean, these weren't suicides or intentional.
Yeah, and I could say in the past 6 months, I know of 4 we've had just in Cottonwood itself, and at least 2 more in county, here in the Cottonwood area.
Right.
That doesn't include Sedona, Prescott Valley, you know, even the other side of the mountain. But that's just here locally, 2 at the Sheriff's Office and 4 with ours. And of those, I would say, of the 4 we've had in Cottonwood, 2 were alcohol mixed with the drugs. The other 2 were just prescription drugs only.
And as you investigated those, what did you find? I mean, is there a common scenario? Oh, he or she was partying, or what do you? And I know you got to be careful about specific cases.
Yeah,
but is there a typical story here again?
It's actually kind of curious. In 2 of the cases, in all 4 of the cases that we investigated, all the people knew each other. They were kind of in the same circles, the same group of people, all knew each other of these deaths. In 2 of them, they were partying at social events, at bars, at concerts, mixed some of the prescription drugs with alcohol. In 2 of them, they were more at the at-home partying with just family and friends. And in all cases, it was very curious that their family didn't know they had this problem with the prescription drugs.
Yeah.
It wasn't known to them.
Such a common theme.
Just a few very close friends who were also involved in the prescription drug abuse knew about it, and it came as a complete shock. And what I found curious about these investigations is we normally had gone to deaths before with meth overdoses, heroin overdoses. You think of your heroin addict, your meth addicts. You think of the junkie laying in the street, and that's not the case with these. And I call them kids. Yeah. They've been 20 to 30-year-olds. They come from good homes. They have good jobs. They have good careers. And so it's really a different side that we haven't seen yet. And it's almost a little shocking when you go into some of these homes to investigate these.
It just seems like the window is only open this far. In other words, one strike and you're out with these kinds of things. You know, sometimes young people might drink a little too much and maybe learn a lesson. Or it just seems like, you know, one time and it can do it especially when you mix alcohol and prescriptions.
Yeah, and a lot of the problems we're seeing is the prescriptions that they're dying from, the drugs they're actually overdosing on, is not a prescription that's prescribed to them.
Right.
They've been on those, like you mentioned, and they got to the point where that just didn't do it for them anymore. So they're out searching for other prescriptions where they buy a prescription, they have no idea what it is.
Right.
They'll get instructed on how to use it by somebody who shouldn't be telling them how to use the drug. That should come from a doctor, not from somebody on the street.
Right.
And unfortunately, it's a bad prescription. If you're not under a doctor's care, you shouldn't be taking it.
We're also seeing incidences where young folks partying have done what they call Skittle Bowls. And everybody at the party brings a handful of prescription medication and they throw them in a bowl. They have no idea what they're getting. They grab a handful of them and take them. So
take this, see what happens. Take that one, see what happens. Wash it down with a beer.
Yeah.
Doctor, this scares the hell out of me.
Well, that's a good point that he brought up, because this is not only about narcotic prescriptions, it's about any prescription medicine that can be misused. For instance, these Skittle Bowls, if they contain medicines that are used safely under a doctor's care for heart disease of one sort or another, hypertension, let's just talk about beta blockers. Beta blockers have been out since the late 60s. They're very effective, safe for long-time use, and used widely. Now, if a beta blocker happens to be in the Skittle Bowl and some young fellow or young lady who has asthma takes a couple of those, it's quite likely to cause constriction of their airways and bring on an asthmatic attack. Now, if that's the case and they're brought to the emergency room, then the doctor who's there is trying to give them medicine to reverse the bronchoconstriction or difficulty with their airways. The beta blocker blocks that. So you can't really treat an asthmatic who's had this sort of overdose of a beta blocker. That's the thing that we're trying to bring out to people. They don't know what they're taking. They're taking them out of proportion to what they should be taking them, perhaps, and they're playing a dangerous game.
Ivan, as a paramedic, information is power. When you're trying to save somebody and you don't know what their ailment truly is,
you might get
huge disadvantage.
We might have a patient we come up on that they may have found this person that was down,
right.
So they don't know what caused them to get to this point, so we have to treat them a certain way in the field, and we will. We call it unconscious unknown. We'll treat them a certain way. But if they, like the doctor said, if they have a medicine on board that we're not aware of, and we can't bring that to the ER, then we're delaying any kind of definitive care on that patient's part at that point, because of the fact that we can't treat them properly for what they've got going on. We can't assume anything, and we don't know what put them in this position that they're in.
In a minute ago, when you kind of described also what happens in this kind of distress, this situation, tell me a little about the time frame. This isn't, you don't have hours and half a day. You've got...
Each person, I tell this to the kids when I talk to them, if you can get, say, a 5 milligram hydrocodone tablet, it's going to affect somebody differently than a 30 milligram Oxycontin tablet.
Sure.
And again, that goes with all the drugs. I'm just throwing those two out there. But you know, I go to talk to these kids, and you've got a girl over here who barely weighs 100 pounds, and you got the football player who weighs 200 pounds. You know, obviously, if she takes the same medication he does, it's going to affect her a lot different. So how kids react, or anybody reacts to these medications, whatever they are, they're narcotics or something else, it depends on the dose, depends on their body weight, metabolism, and that kind of thing, and are they adding alcohol to it.
Well, and when Tiffany, the 100-pound cheerleader, sees Eddie, the 225-pound lineman, take one and says, well, he's okay, it doesn't correlate. And
the other thing is, how do they take it?
Yeah.
One thing I think was involved with the several of the deaths, or at least one of them anyway, in Cottonwood here, was the pill was not taken orally like they were supposed to be taken. You know, when you swallow a pill, it gets digested through your stomach, and it gets broke down, and it gets absorbed into the bloodstream, that kind of thing, and it's a very slow, distinct process. Now, if you crush it up into a powder and snort it up your nose, it goes straight into your bloodstream, straight to your heart, straight to your brain. The effects are that much greater, and you don't know what you're going to get out of the deal, depending on the dose again.
All right. We've got to take another break. I hate to do it, but we do need to pause for just a moment. Great conversation. When we come back, once again, we'll refocus on these are the problems. This is what is happening. We want to go back to the fight that Matt Force is fighting, and hopefully all of the community joins in on, and that is getting rid of this problem and kind of taking the bull by the horns, if you will. Again, our sponsors, Yavapai College, helping us out with this program. We thank them. We thank you and our panel. We'll be back right after this.
Prescription drug abuse. The partnership at drugfree.org.
Sponsored by Matt Force, the Yavapai County Substance Abuse Coalition.
Understanding people and numbers. There's a career in that, dispensing help and medication as a pharmacy technician. Yavapai College has the program. The economy has the jobs. Yavapai College. Life explored. Supporting people, keeping them organized has always been your gift. That's the job of a medical assistant. Yavapai College has the program. The economy has the jobs. Yavapai College. Life explored.
Since 1993, Rice Accounting has been assisting Verde Valley residents with their tax returns. A proud part of the National Jackson Hewitt Tax Service, Rice Accounting can prepare all state and federal returns. They can file electronically or prepare paper returns. They're open year-round to assist you with personal and business taxes, quarterlies, payroll, and account services.
Please come on in to Rice Accounting Jackson Hewitt Tax Service. We're open year-round for all of your taxing needs. Thank you.
Now, hear this.
For less than $30, you can play 9 holes of golf and dine at Verde Santa Fe in Cornville.
Enjoy 9 holes of golf with a power cart. Receive a sleeve of 3 balls plus dinner at Verde Santa Fe's Grill.
Choose from salmon, prime rib, chicken teriyaki, or anything you desire from the menu.
Reservations for 9 and Dine are recommended.
The fun begins every Friday afternoon at 3 for the TGIF party at Verde Santa Fe Golf Club in Cornville.
For tea times and dinner reservations, call 634-5454.
Welcome back to the program. It is our roundtable discussion. Prescription drugs are a problem everywhere in the U.S. and certainly in Yavapai County, the Verde Valley, in our community. And we've got some folks here, Matt Force again, putting really this show together and leading the way in fighting this. Our panel, all members of Matt Force, part of the Speakers Bureaus, what have you, doing a lot of work about this. Guys, how do we get here? Richard, you deal with this at the Verde Valley Guidance Clinic. Just opinion. Give me that from you. How do we get into this soup?
Well, I was thinking this morning about that, and it kind of, I think there's an analogy with the electronic devices that everybody's carrying around and these smartphones, and the saying is there's an app for that. And I think over the past 20, 25, 30 years, we've started believing that no matter what's wrong with you, there's a med for that. Yeah. And that people, seek medical treatment for what used to be considered irritations. And certainly we don't want to do anything to interfere with the legitimate pursuit of medical answers to medical problems. But what we're finding is that, and Dr. Johnson at the emergency department at the hospital here at Verde Valley Medical Center has said that part of the problem is that there were federal guidelines that came out 20 or so years ago regarding the treatment of pain and the aggressive treatment of pain. And so some of these opioids and things that were rarely used in the past are now used commonly. And Dr. Cattolico, I know, has an opinion about that doctors have their own judgments to make, but some people in the medical business are blaming part of this on the federal guidelines as far as treatment of pain.
Do you think so?
Well, some people are doing that, but I think it's really up to the individual physician to try and evaluate the patient as much as he can. A lot of this is subjective. The patient tells you he has pain, and in some cases it's really difficult to elaborate on that as to whether they do or not. You have to rely on studies that might have been done, past medical history, past surgical history, to see if what they're saying is accurate. So it really is a difficult thing to do anymore to treat pain. It's not like it was before. We don't have non-narcotic pain relievers anymore. We did before. Some of them have been taken off the market. So basically you're stuck with medicines in the non-steroidal class like Motrin or Naproxen. And if the patient has a problem with their stomach or an ulcer, then you can't use those medications, and you're really left with nothing but the opioids or opium derivatives. But there are other things that you can do to control pain, and in some cases it's difficult to get the patient to agree that maybe physical therapy will help.
Right.
Because
I want a pill.
That's the American way. I have diabetes, give me a pill. Yeah. You need to go on a diet. You need to exercise. Now just give me a pill. Yeah. So the idea now is I have pain, give me a pill, I want the pain to go away. Well, there might be other ways that we can treat that. Maybe we can send you to a physical therapist. Maybe behavioral therapy will help that as well. Maybe exercise, maybe losing some weight, maybe a better diet. All those things are involved in it, but that's too difficult. So they just want a quick fix.
The Center for Disease Control's #1 recommendation for dealing with this problem, as far as healthcare providers is concerned, is to use opioid medications for acute or chronic pain only after determining that alternative therapies do not work. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly, I think, what Dr. Cattolico is talking about. The lowest effective dose of opioids should be used when that is determined to be the only thing that's going to work.
When Dr. Johnson was on our countywide program a week or two ago, I'm gonna butcher what he said, but the analogy was if you have X injury and you need on a scale of 1 to 100 pain relief, and that injury only needs about a 10, sometimes because of insurance reasons for one thing or another. He says Tylenol 3 will treat the pain associated with that injury, but insurance won't cover it for a lot of folks. So instead they prescribe something else. Well, now you're getting a 25 for a 10 what you need. I don't know if that makes sense, but you're being, in that sense, being overprescribed. You're giving more painkiller than you need to treat your ailment. Doctor, do you see that? And he said, and that leads to that habitual use.
Yeah, and in a lot of cases, the patient's insurance company determines what medication you can prescribe. Yeah. And that's been going on for a number of years, and it's not only in pain medicine, but it comes down to heart medication, blood pressure medication, medication for diabetes. What's effective and we know works may not be covered by the insurance, we have to give something else.
Right.
So something needs to be addressed in that response too. Something has to change.
Is this, I mean, you know, at ground level between patient and doctor, is it going to come to the doctor saying, I know you want the pill, I know you've already prescribed that pill for you, but we need to do something different now? Is it going to be the patient's insistence? Where does it need to start, do you think?
Well, it has to be a decision made between the patient and the physician. However, when the physician feels that the patient is pushing too hard in one direction or another, then that's the time you may have to terminate your relationship with that patient.
Yeah.
Especially if you see them filling prescriptions early, going to another doctor. In some cases, what you do when you know you're going to have a patient on chronic pain medication and it's going to be a long-term proposition, you get them to sign a contract with you, and that contract states that they'll only see you for their pain medication. They'll only go to one pharmacy for their pain medication. They won't call early for refills. They won't read a statement to you that says that the Martians invaded and stole their medication, or that the dog ate it. And in practice for 35 years, I've heard every possible excuse that can exist. But it's a long, drawn-out 25 or 26-item thing that they sign. Now, once they sign that, if they break those propositions that we put up, then you're entitled to discharge them as a patient.
Okay.
Which I'm not sure helps the patient, but you know, it ends a situation where abuse is not going to go any further, at least with you.
The physician's not part of it.
Right.
Sergeant Moore, a couple of the key words that the doctor mentioned there that we heard at the Mat Force meeting the other day: early refills, cash pay. Some red flags or markers, if you will, that maybe someone is going out at another part of this problem we haven't talked to too awfully much yet is I'm selling my pills. I've got a prescription legitimately. I don't really need them anymore because my ankle's fine, but I'm still getting these prescriptions, and now I can go get that for $30 and sell each pill for $5, $10, whatever, to whoever wants it at the bar, at the whatever.
Correct. We're seeing they're making good money off of selling these.
I would think.
They absolutely are. And that's a big part of the issue again. And you know, I think part of this with the young people, as we were talking, you know, we go to our physicians because we trust them and we trust their opinion, and they don't steer us wrong. They're trying to help us to get better. But I think a lot of times some of these kids, some of these younger people that we see that are getting addicted to these prescription drugs are taking them for the fact that they think it's safe because it's prescribed by a physician. Although it wasn't prescribed to them, it might have been prescribed to mom, but look what it does to mom, it doesn't affect her, kind of like we were talking earlier with the football player and the cheerleader.
Yeah.
But the thing is, because it's a prescription drug, it's safe. It's not the meth that we know is dangerous. It's not the heroin that we know is dangerous. It's a prescription drug. It's because we've built that trust with our physicians. Physicians are a trustworthy person. They're not the drug dealer on the street that'll sell you anything, you know, but we're still not taking them in the confines that's supposed to be taken. And I think that becomes a real issue. People think they're okay.
Yeah.
And so that's why they sell them. That's why they buy them. That's why they use them.
Grandma got it at the pharmacy.
Correct.
How bad can it?
How bad can it be?
Do doctors make money prescribing medications?
Well, a physician is paid for his services. If the services involve writing a prescription for a patient after your examination, yes, you do get paid for that. Now, if you're talking about...
You see where I'm going.
Does a physician get paid for writing prescriptions on demand? Well, there have been many, many cases of that where there perhaps is no examination, just a patient walking in and saying, I want 30 OxyContin 40 milligram.
Right.
And the doctor writes a prescription and they leave. Or the receptionist will say, what are you here for today? OxyContin. How many do you want? What strength do you want? Fine. Go in the back room, the prescription's there already. So right now, Florida was having one of the biggest problems with so-called pain clinics, and in the past 6 months they've decided to close a lot of these so-called pain clinics down. They did a lot of undercover work, sent in people who discovered that this was the case, and they're putting out these physicians, putting them out of practice so that they can stop the problem at the source. People were traveling from West Virginia, from Pennsylvania, going down to Florida, visiting 5 doctors, coming home with 400 or 500 pills and selling them for $30 or $40 a piece. I myself am aware of a physician that I knew personally who was outside the Philadelphia area, and patients would go there, and for a $65 fee, he would write them anything they wanted with no examination.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, he's no longer in practice. So, you know, this is one of the things that we'd like to come to light, is that if there are physicians in the area who want to do this or want to try to do this, we'd like to just make them aware that people are watching now.
Yeah.
And it's not just us. There are other agencies watching as well.
You mentioned earlier in the show there are mechanisms, there are ways to for some improved oversight.
Yes.
But as you also said, unless everybody gets on board with it, it's really going to be limited. It'll be limited in its effectiveness.
Well, we're making an effort right now to have the pharmacies get involved in using these sites. The physicians can use them. Right now, according to the pharmacists in town, the corporate headquarters will not let them use the internet to access this information. So through Matt Force and Mr. Dehnert, we're trying to contact these corporations, have some interplay with them to let them know how important this is. The state board feels it's important, that's why they put the site up.
Right.
And they, after I talked to a fellow last week named Mr. Dehnert, who's on the state board, they are actively trying to convince the corporations to allow their pharmacists to use the site as well. Because we need better cooperation and information to be spread between the pharmacist and physician, like it used to be.
Yeah.
So that we can pinpoint a problem and try to correct that problem.
Richard, it's a big problem. The answer's going to take a big answer. A lot of different ways to go about this. You had some numbers, I think, that you wanted to share with us.
Well, there's been a tenfold increase in the medical use of opioid painkillers in the last 20 years. That's
opioids. I'm sorry, but opioids means what?
Doctor, you're the expert on that.
These are medications that are derived from opium, morphine, codeine, and all its derivatives.
What we associate with strong.
These are classified as narcotics, either Schedule II or Schedule III by the government.
Okay.
And really restricted.
But I think the key thing about what the doctor said was considering what is the source. And, you know, Matt Force has been running radio and television and print ads for years, trying to convince young people that prescription drug abuse is dangerous and that it's to be avoided and that they can have very bad consequences with it. But still we're seeing these deaths among young people here in our community. So and we'll continue with that strategy, but we're also looking at the strategy of what's the source. Over the last 3 years, Matt Force has conducted a number of Dump the Drugs events, and I know you've helped promote those. They have been so successful that people have dumped 5,000 pounds of prescription and over-the-counter medications at these Dump the Drugs events, and it currently is available at the police departments. Most of the police departments in Yavapai County will accept prescription medications on a daily basis.
Folks, just real quick, if I may, folks could bring in their old prescriptions, if they're unused, what have you, and rather than throw them away, where they could be fished out or who knows what, even end up in the waterways.
Right.
They will be destroyed. I think incinerated, Sergeant, is typically how it's taken care of, so that they can't go anywhere beyond your medicine cabinet into the trash.
Don't flush them down the toilet, because that affects the water supply. But when there are 5,000 pounds of these medications out there that those are just the ones people bothered to dispose of properly and dump the drugs. What's the multiplier for the ones that weren't disposed of properly? Obviously, there's a source for these, and it's healthcare providers and pharmacies. And somewhere along the line, we've developed a system where so many medications are being prescribed and distributed that the market is just awash with them.
Yeah.
And whether it's prescribing too much or whether it's people who are fraudulently obtaining these medications with fake prescriptions or whatever, Matt Force has decided we're going to get to the bottom of it and we're going to figure out what we can do to make sure that people get the medications they need, but that we don't have thousands of pounds of unneeded or potentially abused medications floating around in our community.
A lot of these medicines enter the pipeline in a legal or legitimate way.
We have to believe that most of them do.
Yeah, and then from there, anybody's in the game.
Again, the point that I'd like to make too is that some of these not all these medications are narcotics, or medicines that are used for anxiety or depression. Some of the medicines that might come in are antibiotics that are no longer useful. medications for high blood pressure, medications for asthma, etc. So one of the reasons that there may be an abundance of medications at home is there are a lot of different medications on the market now that didn't used to be on the market. So a physician has a lot of choices. You don't give somebody who has high blood pressure 4 prescriptions on their first visit. You might try one and then try another, see which is agreeable to the patient. Now, when you change a medicine and don't use the other medicine anymore, the patient's supposed to put that on the side. What we'd like them to do is get rid of it. But that's not happening. So sometimes you'll find a patient, when you tell them to bring all their medicines in, with 3 prescriptions for the same medicine, all different doses. And unfortunately, in some cases in the senior citizen crowd, you'll find that they're still taking the first 2 when you change to the 3rd. And that's one of the important things about telling a patient, every time you come in, bring me all your medicines. Patients are often seen by more than one physician. They see a family doctor, they see a cardiologist, they see a urologist. If we don't see all the medicines that are being prescribed, and we're not told in a report from that physician that they're taking a different medicine, then we could perhaps do something wrong in prescribing something that conflicts with what a specialist gave them.
Sure.
So that's one of the important things we try to do too, is have the patient bring in all their medicines, especially when they're on a lot of chronic medications for a lot of various problems.
And it illustrates how this fight really needs to kind of start with everybody. I hate to say we're all kind of part of the problem, but just by being educated, we'll make sure that we're not a kind of part of that, and so that these drugs don't end up in the wrong hands, or that you yourself, with legitimate prescriptions, are not taking something you no longer need to, or maybe didn't in the first place. We've got to take just another short break. Again, we thank our panel today, and we also thank another of our sponsors, Rice Accounting, Jackson Hewitt Lewis Rice. We're always saying thank you to Lewis for helping us with these special programs, and we do it again today. It's our program today. It's a roundtable discussion, prescription drugs. A big problem, but some answers are in the offing. We'll come back right after this.
Understanding people and numbers. There's a career in that, dispensing help and medication as a pharmacy technician. Yavapai College has the program. The economy has the jobs. Yavapai College. Life explored. Supporting people, keeping them organized has always been your gift. That's the job of a medical assistant. Yavapai College has the program. The economy has the jobs. Yavapai College. Life explored.
Now, hear this.
For less than $30, you can play 9 holes of golf and dine at Verde Santa Fe in Cornville.
Enjoy 9 holes of golf with a power cart. Receive a sleeve of 3 balls plus dinner at Verde Santa Fe's Grill.
Choose from salmon, prime rib, chicken teriyaki, or anything you desire from the menu.
Reservations for 9 and Dine are recommended.
The fun begins every Friday afternoon at 3 for the TGIF party at Verde Santa Fe Golf Club in Cornville.
For tea times and dinner reservations, call 634-5454. Since 1993, Rice Accounting has been assisting Verde Valley residents with their tax returns. A proud part of the National Jackson Hewitt Tax Service, Rice Accounting can prepare all state and federal returns. They can file electronically or prepare paper returns. They're open year-round to assist you with personal and business taxes, quarterlies, payroll, and account services.
Please come on in to Rice Accounting, Jackson Hewitt Tax Service. We're open year-round for all of your taxing needs. Thank you.
Every year, 2 million kids play doctor by taking pills not prescribed to them. Talk to your kids about the dangers of prescription drug abuse. The partnership at drugfree.org.
Sponsored by MatForce, the Yavapai County Substance Abuse Coalition.
Again, welcome back to the program, our roundtable discussion on prescription medications. Guys, I want to thank you so much for our chat so far today. And again, it's a huge problem. We may do more of these panel discussions. Certainly, MatForce will be holding them on a monthly basis, and folks doing a lot of work all around the clock trying to resolve some of these issues. I got to tell you, guys, when I pick up the Reader's Digest at home, there's a little bit of text and comedy, and then most of what that is, and not to pick on them, are pharmaceutical ads. from your nose to your toes, different kinds of things out there. Do you get that as a physician? Somebody comes in and says, well, I saw this for my issue. And is that a problem or a help or somewhere in between?
Well, we do get that.
Yeah.
And I view it as a problem because a lot of times these medicines that are advertised, for instance, on television as a panacea for the particular problem that they talk about may be very costly, first of all, because they're new. Secondly, it's perhaps not the right prescription to give to that patient. Third, and least of all, in my opinion, is the fact that the pharmaceutical companies are promoting these to the people, but the insurance companies are not going to pay for these things because there are more reliable, less expensive drugs on the market that do the same thing.
Right.
So there's a lot of doubling of prescription medications on the market for the same problem. Just because it's new doesn't mean it's better.
Right.
And just because it's new doesn't mean that every patient should be switched from their old reliable to the new medication. And in a lot of cases, you can't do it because the insurance companies just will not pay for it.
Sure. And
so it is a difficulty.
The pharmaceuticals spend billions to market these things.
Yes, they do.
Just like new cars.
Yes.
Yeah, it's something. While we're here, we're doing prescription medication today, but I've got to ask, well, since I've just got the four of you here, if real quick I can throw out there the prescription marijuana. Richard, any thoughts on this? Is this going to be another issue? We talked earlier about people going to pharmacies and shopping and different kinds of things. From your perspectives, is this going to be what do you think? I just want opinion.
At this point, we really don't know what medical marijuana in Arizona is going to look like because of the competing lawsuits.
Right.
I think just yesterday, some of the people who want to build dispensaries filed suit against the state for not issuing licenses to do that. We don't know where that's going to end up. At this point, the only I guess people who can legally use marijuana are the patients, and since there are no dispensaries, they're allowed to grow their own. That could be the law of unintended consequences for sure, but we really don't know where that's going to end up.
It just seems like the difference here is that most of these drugs that are being used, say, recreationally, and maybe it's a subtle difference, as we talked about earlier, have entered the pipeline in kind of a legal, legitimate way through a doctor relation, and now marijuana will be, which has been known for decades as a recreational kind of thing. And to me, that seems, I'd like to ask the police officer, that just seems like a huge hill to have to get over for a lot of people. I don't know, but it just seems like this one's going to be a real, it already is with the legal issues over this kind of challenge, but it really seems like this one's going to be a tough one.
It will be, and we're on a sit and wait.
Right.
Like I said, to see how it's going to shake out, how it's going to be. I mean, you got your federal laws that state it ain't going to happen or can't happen, and they'll still enforce people who grow their own. The feds can. So at the police department, we're just taking the tactic of let's wait and see. See how it shakes out, and we'll move on.
It just seems from there so ripe for abuse that I don't know. In a future discussion, perhaps we'll know more and be able to kind of tackle that. As we kind of begin to wrap up, fellas, I'd like to just kind of get some closing comments from you. There's been a lot of talk here today. We've talked about the problems. We've talked about some of the solutions that are in play. And as you leave us, Ivan, can I ask you, what would you like our audience to know, and folks, young or old, to kind of get behind or to understand the next time they go fill that prescription or leave it on the shelf longer than it should? What's the message we'd like to?
I guess this whole issue is not just like a one-angle approach, and there's so many different things involved with it on the doctor's end, on the pharmacy end, on the educational end, law enforcement. I guess the thing I would say, and this is just my own personal opinion, this is not something from MatForce, but is personal accountability. When you're getting these medications and the doctor says, well, I'm going to give you 50. Well, I probably don't need 50. Maybe you can just give me, 20 or whatever.
Ask yourself that question.
Well, that and ask the doctor, If you're, again, like I mentioned the ankle earlier, so you go in, you have to get some hydrocodone for your ankle, Vicodin, same thing. Say, the doctor gives you a prescription for 100. Do I really need 100, doctor? This will heal up in, say, 4 weeks, and if I take 3 a day for 4 weeks, I don't need 100 probably.
Right.
Do the math and figure it out. And then at that point, if you don't use them, then get rid of them. I talk to the kids in the school all the time about where they come from. Majority of these medications come from family. whether it's grandma and grandpa or whether it's mom and dad or whatever. Some do come from other students and that kind of thing, but that's where it's coming from, is from the homes. And it's such a many-faceted issue that I think it would have to just come to accountability on yourself and taking notice, as a parent. What's in your house, what's available to these kids, and your children are not dumb. They know what's out there. I talk to these kids about narcotics, and I rattle off 6 or 7 different names. They know the majority of the names. Yeah. They also know how much they cost. They know more than
probably we think by a long shot they do. Folks talk to your kids talk to your grandparents, everybody, and that's really the thrust of MatForce, I think, in a nutshell, is education and understanding that. Doctor, same question. As we wrap up today, what do you want to leave folks kind of understanding?
Well, I think the first thing that I'd like to see happen through MatForce and through some urging on our part as individuals is to get the pharmacists and the physicians involved to start using this important website that the State Board of Pharmacy has. It's there for a reason. It's there for us to be able to monitor what the patients are doing beyond our control as far as them going to other doctors in other counties and other cities. And if more people used it and better communication was had between the pharmacist and the physician, I think we'd solve some of this problem. The other thing I'd like to see come out of this is that parents should be aware now, or should be made aware, that the prescription medications that they have in the house should be in a secure place. Regardless of the type of medication it is, it can still cause a problem, even if it's for blood pressure. So with those two things in mind, I think if we can accomplish that and some better education and maybe self-awareness on the part of the physicians in the area as to what's happening and why it's happening, we'll accomplish a goal.
Sergeant, same question as we wrap up.
For me, it's really simple. In these deaths that I've investigated here in the Cotton area, these 4 in this past 6 months that we've had, in a couple of them, the subjects that had died were the same age as one of my own children. Mm-hmm. So I was the same age as some of the parents that I've dealt with, that I've sat there and had them cry on my shoulder while I had to tell them, what's happened to their loved one. And the really sad part about it, and I think this is what we really need to realize, is these deaths are preventable. These kids were not the junkies laying in the curb, that you kind of expected. It was unexpected. And they're completely preventable deaths. And there's nothing we want more in our own lives to live a long, healthy, successful life. And there's nothing more we want for our children than to do that same thing. And so we need to step up and find ways to prevent this from happening, so we prevent these deaths, because they are completely 100% preventable. But unless we take charge of it, and we, I mean the parents, the family members, the doctors, the community, the pharmacies, everybody, everybody needs to get involved in this. We're not going to prevent these deaths. And preventing something that's completely preventable, to me, is just wrong when we have to lose young people because of it.
Frustrating for a policeman, frustrating for anybody. And Richard, as we wrap up our program, some final thoughts from you, sir.
Well, as MatForce has done in the past, and with great success, we're going to take a multifaceted approach to this as far as addressing the source of these medications, and we also want to look at the cost to the entire healthcare system of these medications that are paid for at some point and sometimes misused or abused. So education is important, and we have to also remember that addiction is at the bottom of a lot of this. Right. And as long as we have addiction, there's going to be a need for treatment for that. And it's a very expensive proposition. People who use opioids have direct health care costs that are 8 times more than the average person. And so there's just a tremendous number of facets of this that we have to address.
It can seem daunting, but there's a work already underway. Contact MatForce. Look them up online for a lot of different leads to all of our panelists, for one thing, and the work that they do, but to MatForce as well. Find out what it's about, and just open your mouths. Talk a little bit to the kids, to the grandparents, to whoever is in your life that you may have concerns about. Even if you don't have concerns, it's an issue worth dinner table discussion. We thank our panel so much. Our sponsors, MatForce, Verde Santa Fe, Rice Accounting, and Yavapai College. It is our roundtable discussion. We appreciate your attendance as well. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.